All right, you're good.
Yep.
All right, good evening, everyone. It's good to see everyone back again. This is our annual board meeting for the Avon Grove Charter School. We are at the Collaboratorium. Everyone is live here. It's good, like I said, to see everyone. So we do have a quorum. We're going to call it to order, and we're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. If everyone would recite the mission statement, please. To inspire passion for lifelong learning, one student at a time. Great. Roll call. Who's doing roll call this evening? Sarah.
Dwayne Degler,
Here.
Eugene Steger,
Here.
Stacy Barno. Here. Rob Renier,
Here.
Colleen Preston,
Here.
Deji Akintoy,
Not here.
Brian Ladman,
Here.
Kristen Smith,
Here.
and Michelle McCray.
Here.
Deji just walked in, so he is here.
Perfect,
And
thank
Sarah, can I just ask if this is all new? We have a whole new setup. We sound okay? You can hear everybody?
Yeah, you guys sound great.
Oh, well, that's good. All right, we're going to move along. Business and finance. We have the administrators 2021-2022 fiscal year expenditure approval limits. We'll let you go ahead, Donna.
Okay, so we do have a few business and finance items in preparation for the new fiscal year. We do have some changes to the Fulton Bank credit card holders. We will be adding Caitlin Leonard. She is our new Director of Special Education for a credit limit of $1,000. So I'm requesting the board review the Fulton Bank credit card holders and their credit limits tied to the school. And then we're looking for a motion to approve. These would go in effect on 7/1/2021. There's no increase to the credit card limit. It's just adding one and decreasing the amount available to purchasing for credit card transactions.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the addition of the person to the Caitlin Leonard to the credit card limits and authorization?
I'll motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, that was Colleen.
I'm sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion? Opposed? It passes. Thank you.
All right. Second, we have the AGCS departmental expenditures, the administrator approval limits. There are no changes to the existing, but we are adding 2 administrators, Matthew Mesnick as the high school principal. He'll have the ability to approve up to $1,000. And we'll also be adding Caitlin Leonard as Director of Special Education. She'll be responsible for approving special education expenditures up to $1,000. So we're looking for the board to approve the administrator expenditure threshold approvals for 21-22.
Okay. Any questions on that? Do we have a motion to approve the expenditure approval limits for 2021-2022?
I'll motion. Rob Renier.
Rob Renier, thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second Stacy Barno.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you.
All right, and last but not least, I have ESSER's 3 expenditures. So as we move through the budget, the ESSER's 3 amount, the allotment for the charter school was made available. It's a little over $2 million. We utilized ESSER's 2 money in the current fiscal year budget, and ESSER's 3 money was still out there. So with the caveat that as we identified learning loss programs for students to fill the gaps from the year that they were online learning, we would present the board with the expenditure, and the offsetting revenue would be that ESSER's 3 grant. So since the time of the budget approval, there have been 3 positions that have been identified. Learning interventionists, 2 for Kemblesville and 1 for State Road. These would be full-time positions that would run for 1 year. So it's not a continuous, the contract would be 1 year. They would be brought on staff, so they would be our staff members. They would be on our salary scale. They would be eligible for benefits because they'll be working for the 10 months. And total impact for the 3 interventionists comes out to in excess of $216,000. Again, Kristen, you can speak more to the instructional need for that.
We went over the ESSER's money options and we had our data meetings, which identified several students in tier 2 and tier 3 through the MTSS process. So I spoke to the instructional team along with the data coordinator, and right now they think it's manageable to be able to give the kids the intervention groups that they need, with 2 additional interventionists at Kemblesville and 1 at State Roads. We will use that ESSER's money for that need unless opposed by the board.
Okay, and another new information, the allowable uses for ESSERS 3 continue to change. So initially, when it first came out, the full amount could have been used for capital improvement expenditures such as ventilation, and you can still utilize the money. You need to secure approval. But now they've entered in that a certain percentage of the grant needs to be utilized towards learning loss programs. So initially there was no learning loss requirement, then it was 20%, and now it's 40%. So again, so we will need to spend this money on learning loss programs. We do have some summer camps running through the summer that we're utilizing the grant. We have,
Which we went over, so you got.
right, and it's all
Yeah.
included in the budget. So again, with these new allowable uses, and we do anticipate more changes through till August.
Yeah.
We are utilizing the money as federal funds are allotted. So administration is looking for the board to approve these 3 one-year full-time positions for a budget impact of $216,636.
Correct. Any questions or comments?
Is there a plan to try to retain these people after the year, or?
The goal is not to keep interventionists. The goal is to get all our kids where they're supposed to be and not need interventionists. So the goal is always to eliminate as many interventions because kids are making that much progress. But only time will tell. You have this money for a certain amount of time, and that would be another discussion if you approve this to be decided, or we would do it year to year based on how many kids still need the intervention.
I mean, is it common to be able to find some people to fill these positions?
So we've had several this year that we're subbing. So we actually do have candidates that know our interventions and that are looking to secure positions like this.
Thanks.
That was a great question. Any other questions? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the grant for the expenditures of the 3 additional?
Stacy Barnell, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the 3 additional interventionists through ESSERS 3 funding.
Cool. Do I have a second?
Brian Leibman, I'll second.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Passed unanimous.
Great. And FYI, after this expenditure, there's still in excess of 1.8 million to spend.
How exciting.
Isn't that exciting?
It is exciting. All right, we are now at the moment, but before we move to the next section, I did want to take a second and recognize we do have 2 board members who are leaving us after many years of commitment and dedication. And I just want to say thank you. I didn't work with you that long, but it's been a pleasure and an honor to work with you, and I'm glad you were here to help guide us. And I would like to thank you. I know Kristen has a gift for you and something, but does anyone else on the board want to say anything?
Knew what they got into, especially this year, but very much appreciate the school, your leadership,
Yeah.
admired. Thank you
Yes.
for everything.
Yes, it was awesome. So,
The pay's great.
yeah, the pay is awesome, right? So having said that, does anyone else want to say anything? Eugene?
I
you've
would
been
like
here?
to.
Oh, Michelle, please
Yeah.
do, please do.
I'm really going to miss Rob and Kristen because for the newer members, they've been here a really long time, and both of them have put in more than their fair share of effort. So it's really appreciated. It's going to be sad not having you here, but thank you.
Yes, thank you.
You're always welcome to come back and visit. If you got any vacancies, we'll visit.
Yeah, come on back.
Eugene plan.
Yeah. All right. Well, having said that, I thank you. And unfortunately, I will ask you to,
Now leave.
now you may now leave.
Participate.
And I am going to swear in the two new board members.
I'm not signing them.
Okay, now you can.
Oh,
Or
man.
stay, it's up to you.
Yes.
I know you do.
I just want to get the names correct. All right, so I'm going to call people up. We do have two new board members.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much. So I'll swear them in. Christopher Shuck, who is serving a 2-year position, filling a 2-year vacancy. And I want to make sure I say it right. I know I looked at it. I'm sorry. Julia Brenham, who is doing a 1-year term. So I'm going to ask Christopher to come up.
Stay right.
No.
Byram. Sorry.
It's all good. Nobody else.
All right, Christopher. Raise your right hand, put it on the Bible. You're going to repeat after me. I, Christopher Shuck,
I, Christopher Shuck,
do solemnly swear that I will
do solemnly swear that I will
support, obey, and defend
support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
and I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Congratulations. Welcome to the Avon Grove Charter School Board.
Thank you.
Take a seat. Come on up, Julia.
Great.
Brenham.
Byram.
Byram, I did it again. All right.
It's totally okay. You want a high five about it? It's
I
totally
do.
fine.
I, Julia Byram,
I, Julia Byram,
do solemnly swear that I will
do solemnly swear that I will
support, obey, and defend
support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office.
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Ms. Byram, thank you so much. All righty. I will get it right one of these days, I think. All right, so my thing is not coming up here. There we go. We're going to do the board reorg if my computer starts to work. All right. Reorganization. All right, so board reorganization. We'll start with board president. I will put my name forward again, but if there's anyone else, and then we will take motions from the floor. Will someone use the motion?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thank you very much. Now it gets a little easier. It's kind of weird, so. All right, so we'd like to move forward. Arno as vice president this year.
Second. Come on, give her a chance.
Gee knows. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Moving forward to treasurer, excuse me, I apologize, treasurer. There was a motion last week by a former member who has left the room that Deji may be interested in the treasurer position. I am happily willing to nominate you if that is still something that you're willing to do.
It is.
Anyone else interested? Smart people. All right, I would like to nominate Deji for treasurer. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and all opposed? Congratulations. All right, for the position of secretary, I would again take any nominations, but I would like to recommend Michelle McCray, but Anyone else have any opinions or suggestions? I will nominate Michelle. Is there a second?
I'll second Stacy Barno.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. That finishes out the executive board. What I would ask you to do is, we are not having a meeting in July, but we do have a retreat coming up in August. But what I would ask in the next 2 or 3 weeks, sooner the better, if you guys could think about the different committee memberships and what you would be interested in being on. We have facilities, HR, strategic planning, help me out, and finance. So if any of those strike your fancy, please send me an email. You all will get to your email addresses tonight. They're actually down here. If you could hand those to me, make sure you get them.
In the binder too?
Yeah.
They have in the binder.
Okay, just in case, there you go. And you'll find my email as well. So just send me what you're interested in. And that would go for the rest of the board as well, because I have no problem reorganizing how everything goes. All right,
May I add one thing?
please.
For the president, vice president, and treasurer, if you could just see me at some point tonight, I need a copy of your driver's license and your social security number so I can get the bank signature card started tomorrow.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And then I'll be looking for you before the 13th to get your signature. I'll drive anywhere.
No, we'll come to you. It's all good.
So we get those to the bank and have everything in place by mid-July.
Thank you very much, Donna. We'll definitely do that. All right, so now we're moving along. CEO Annual Priorities Report, 2020-2021 Financial Presentation.
So Donna's up first.
Yep.
Go ahead, Donna. Donna already presented the financial budget, but this is a quick overview for you if you have any questions of what she's presented thus far.
And it will be up on
No, this one's up on the TV.
It's up on the TV.
over there.
So the bylaws require that we do a quick May presentation, projected June, and then some official documents that we present to the board each year. So the May closing has been completed, included on board docs for your review, and in your packets are detailed of the May financials, included the balance sheet, the budget versus actual for May 31st, 2021, the P&L statement, expanded, so you'll see each budget line item. There's a capital asset expenditure report, as well as a statement of cash flows, AR aging, AP aging, and the check register for May. With regards to the financial reporting for June, this is a projection based on what we know as of today and outstanding budget line items we're waiting for invoices. We have a pretty good idea. Special education usually lags about a month behind. Transportation for students, some facility costs, as well as some capital expenditures. But based on the projections and looking at the P&L and what we're waiting to come in, tell you that it looks like we're going to end the year in a very good position. So right now, projections prior to the fund transfer for the capital expenditures, we're looking at a surplus of $972,236. So it was a good year. This is subject to auditor review. The auditor starts his process, his site visit next Wednesday, and then the official 2-week visit will be scheduled at the end of August. But at this point,
What slide do you want me on? What slide do you want me on?
oh, sorry, keep going. One more. There we go. Thank you. Fran. I
Yeah, just
forgot
say
you
next
were
slide.
doing it.
Yep.
Oh, keep going. Keep going. One more. All right. Okay, we're good.
We're halfway through.
I told you it was gonna be quick. I knew I had time in it, so at the end of the day, it was a good year. We're 751,000 over budget. And then with regard to the fund transfer for capital expenditures, we came in slightly lower than anticipated. Not all of the projects were completed last year. Some have to do with COVID, delivery, orders, multiple reasons, staff, people unavailable. So it was a good year, and I'm looking forward to the auditor coming. Okay, next slide, Brian. Okay, the next slide is cash assets. Something we watched closely this year. I'm sorry Rob isn't here.
We ended the year with available cash assets with 8.9 million. So we really need to work on our days cash on hand equation. Standard & Poor's is looking for us to get to 180 days, which I don't know how we'll do that given our requirements from the state, but we did very well. We managed it monthly. We employed a lot of the best practices for cash flow management. And as, so with regard to days cash on hand, Chris, and our calculation this year is going to be very good. And then last but not least, the capital campaign. We're at 18,000. We started drawing down on that as we are working on the art swing. So we're looking for that project and capital campaign to come to a conclusion this summer. And that should be zeroed out by the end of August. So very, very happy with our cash assets. Brian, next slide. Okay, last but not least is our debt service ratio and our cash liquidity calculations based on the projections. So we're required to come in at 1.10 for our investors. We're projecting at 3.02, and days cash on hand, we're coming in at a little over 120 days. So we did very well. All of the strategies that we employed last year to improve days cash on hand worked, and accounts payable is in pretty good shape. So it wasn't like we didn't pay anything to get there. So accounts payable is great. Okay, moving forward, next slide, Brian. Enrollment, that hasn't changed since our June board meeting. We ended enrollment with 1852. It was 39 under budget, but according to the information from Brian, it looks like we're going to come right on budget next year, if not slightly over. Okay, next slide. The school is required to submit officer certificates to the board, basically stating that to the best of our knowledge, there's been no fraud or misbehavior going on in the past year. So those certificates are included in your book, and they're also available on site, on the website. Also included is the fiscal year budget, which was approved on June 15th. This is the summarized version. There have been no changes. There were the interventionists that we requested approval, and that will be, those changes will be made to the pro forma. So as we move through the year, the pro forma will be updated with any new positions or eliminated positions or significant changes throughout the year. And last but not least, the organizational chart has been provided to the board members. Kristen presented it at our June 15th meeting, and there have been no changes to that. And the copy has been made available to the board in hard copy, and it's also available online. So I know that was very quick. Does anyone have any questions?
I do. Donna, you expect the enrollment numbers to go up higher significantly than we're seeing on this worksheet?
Right now, we budgeted for 1891. Brian has a significant number of students enrolled, but we have not.
Brian, what's the number right now? 2,100, you said?
So like 2,000.
Oh, wow.
So what happens is we graduate a class of 66 and we bring in a class of 180 kindergartners. And I think to date, this morning, we've only had 66 students withdraw.
And we have 600 in a waiting list?
And we've, yeah, about that. And then we enroll in March and through the spring based on historical attrition, which we actually cut in half because I was nervous. And we're still over. So we're sitting healthy right now so that if we do get an August wave of attrition, we have the buffer already there that we can have students leave and still hit our budget target, but we also have an extremely healthy waiting list across all of the grade levels.
Great, thank you.
And they're calling every day.
Good.
There's siblings that haven't gotten it, which is really hard.
Wow. Donna, will our bond rating increase because of our position with the 120 and the 3.0?
That's what we're working towards. So because of the political climate and our inability to get that cash on hand, I mean, we work at it each year and we go back and forth with Standard & Poor's. So we've been able to secure 2 stables. With COVID and the political climate, there was a lot of pushback from Standard & Poor's to get a stable rating. There's been a lot of schools who are stable that have received unstable because of the possible rate decreases, especially with regards to cyber charter schools. So I anticipate that since we have significant gains in days cash on hand and our debt service ratio has been consistent year over year, I do anticipate a favorable rating this year, and we'll fight for it. I mean, we will definitely fight for it. We only can control what we can control. We can't control the climate that's in Harrisburg. We can be there to address it and do everything that we can to secure resources for our students. But at the end of the day, we can't be held responsible for a climate that's in Harrisburg that is not favorable to charter schools. But what we can defend is that our charter school has done very well academically, met all of the state standards, and with regard to bond covenants, we've hit them year over year. So that is basically our argument to them. And we just need to make sure that we continue to implement all of these strategies that we've worked for many years to bring us to this level. So yes, Jean, I'm hoping for a favorable this year.
Good.
2 favorables, and then the following year I'll be looking for a rating increase.
Any further questions for Donna? Excellent.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Was that 5 minutes?
That was good, Don.
That was good. You were very good.
All right. So at the last board meeting, we went over goals. You'll be seeing those goals again and again and again and again through the school year. We want to focus on one goal this annual meeting. So for the new board members, you'll see those goals again if you weren't at the last board meeting. And we'll, have them on the agendas as we talk through the school year. But the big goal that we have for next year is about our high school modular units. So currently our modular units, the middle school and high school modular are very old. They are at capacity and we are fighting for space. That enrollment discussion was a great one to be able to have this conversation about what we're going to do with the need and old buildings that are technically not, they're practically falling apart. So we have our architects that have been with us for how long? 10,
Longer than that.
15 years? 16 years? Oh, yeah, because Kemblesville, yeah, okay. So a long time, almost to when we first arrived here. We're having our 20-year anniversary, so that speaks to how long they've been with us and know every detail of this building, of the progress that we've made in this building, along with the progress we made over at Kemblesville. And we have grand plans on how to help the modular unit issue, along with the need for kids that want to be here and how we can help that. Now, this is not a new conversation for the new board members. This is a conversation that we've had for multiple years. Last year, a lot of the conversation was about Fred S. With Avon building their new high school, they'll have another building that's empty. And obviously, we do a good job with empty buildings in Avon. With that being said, they're also on their own timeline and they're not sure if they're going to need that space. So they're really only willing to lease with us. Which that means is you have these kids that need a home. And if they need to take that building back, we'll have nowhere to go. So we don't think that's a good feasible option right now, but it is something that we are talking to the superintendent about, Chris Marchese, along with if one of the options that you look at tonight needs a temporary placement for kids, that's also an option. So that is where a lot of the conversation was last year, was about Fred S. And empty buildings. We have 3 options on the table, and the board, what I'm looking for is no decision, obviously, need to be made tonight. But what I need is a focus. The architects and the administrative team needs to plan down a road. And you're going to see 3 feasible options. One seems pretty clear to us, but you as the board need to support that path so that we can do the planning that it takes to give you the information that you need. So Matt and Jared are here tonight to really talk high level scope of these 3 options. And I'm hoping that the board, and if we need more time and we want to use some of the retreat time or August meetings to talk further about these 3 options, I'm fine. If there's a straight answer that you think that you are willing to say, I think this is the path that we need to go down, we're willing to have that conversation, but this is where we wanted to spend the bulk of the meeting. So I'm going to give this to Jared and Matt, and they're going to go through the exciting options that they have on the table.
So I'm Jared Bookhammer with Heckenberg Shiles.
And Matt Heckenberg.
So Kristen had a really great summary as far as what we really are focusing on. What we wanted to really start the presentation was just to give you everyone an overview of what we've been really working on the last few months. We were contracted to really go through a multi-phase process with the school and various teams. So I want to give a quick summary and background to show you where we have been and where we are headed. So I'm going to move through the early portion fairly quickly, but please feel free to jump in, ask questions as needed. So overall, we were working on a school-wide facilities plan, not specifically focused on the high school modular, but the overall campus, both State Road and Campbellsville. So we were looking at evaluating the current buildings at both campuses, gather insight and programming data from the key stakeholders, addressing the school short-term, looking at 3 and 5 year terms, and also long-term 10-year plan. And then help to facilitate execution and document ownership of the overall maintenance plan, just to help keep tracking of that and utilize that over time, help plan for facilities improvements. So early on, we developed this project schedule, which really went through the 4 phases that we outlined from the start. Was the existing campus evaluation, programming, master planning, and then the final key was that document ownership. Identified the key steering committee components, as far as from the Hacking Child's team and then the Avon Grove Charter School team.
And there's also, just to add some flavor, there's 2 other entities that aren't represented here tonight. One is Schiller Hirsch, which is a mechanical electrical plumbing engineer who assisted in evaluation of some of the existing facilities. And also Becker and Frondorf is a construction cost consultant, which we'll be working with more as we move forward with planning.
And you as board members probably remember Jared and Matt at some of your committee meetings where they asked you specific questions. That was all part of this process.
So just a quick summary again, or your screenshot here of what we put together for each campus evaluation. So I'm going to again sort of flip through while we talk about it, but we completed overall assessment, walkthroughs of the building, updated assessments of the zoning criteria on the campuses. Make sure that the information we have is accurate, current. We looked at the program usage of the current facilities and identified that here in these graphics. In the process of going through the building evaluation, we've categorized the different types of needs throughout the facility, and that color coding that of all these different aspects then directly relate to the whole overall spreadsheet that is developed. That has all the different line items of the different items that we noticed and noted, and then allocated per which prioritization year. As you can see, some of these start to get filled in with some budgetary numbers, and that's the intent. The end goal will be that these will all have an associated rough order of magnitude budget to them that we can use for planning purposes for what years it makes sense to allocate those projects. So then this is looking at those same line items, just in a different format to help identify where in the facilities those evaluation items are tagged. So it helps sort of everyone to be able to sort of go to a location and actually see those items. And also, as this is designed for a 10-year period, 8 years down the road when there's different people involved, potentially, this is still a helpful guide to help understand what we were looking at this point in time. Including the modulars, we looked at all the facilities on campus. So there are improvements that can be made in all of them. And then some photograph representation of those different areas and conditions that we identified, as well as taking a look at the exterior campus, the site as a whole. Out of that, we basically, there were quite a few that sort of came out as higher priority projects, and this all was generated from walkthroughs with the facilities group as well throughout the facility and key projects that really wanted to be focused on. So a lot of these, all of these show up in the overall spreadsheet, but these were sort of 12 key ones that we had picked out of for State Road. Then we traveled over to Campbellsville and we went through the same process that we did here at State Road. So again, looking at the overall facility, making sure our graphics, our site plans are accurate, our zoning information for the site, and looking at the usage and taking that walkthroughs again with the facilities group and developing the overall list of maintenance items to be focused on over the next 10 years.
And so the big picture of all this, just as Joe is strolling through, is to generate a more purposeful and intentional approach to maintenance and upgrades and also quantify the costs associated with that in the context of potential capital improvements.
And similarly at Campbellsville, identifying some higher priority pieces out of all of those to be focused on. And that again sort of helps just speak to some of how we are prioritizing things as we get into 3, 5, 10-year allocations. So as we were wrapping that up, we began the architectural programming portion. So again, really, the key in programming is really having the right people at the table to talk about the different aspects that we were interested in. As Kristen mentioned, we spoke to quite a few different people and committees as far as what we're looking for. Actually, I'll go through the set of questions that we had. We had sort of a summarization of it here. But this really is just a recap of all those different interviews that we were conducting. This did not really involve any parent coordination. This is all within the Avon Grove Charter School organization. So basically the summaries, we really broke it into a few different areas. So the big picture concepts and what everyone felt, what they viewed as Avon Grove Charter School's core principles, the vision, what's the image the school wants to project. And really we pulled out a lot of keywords that were being utilized and that we saw through the multiple different interviews. And that's really here you can see in this word cloud, a lot of the collaboration and safety, engaging spaces is a lot of that. We looked at the evaluation of the current conditions and then the assessment of how people felt about the current spaces and the issues that were identified. And then as also future as far as where does anyone envision the growth of an expansion of the school. So this really was the exciting part where people got to think about the future of the school and programmatic aspects as well as just physical spaces, what are good needs and focuses. And then the final interview team was with the technology team. It helped give us an understanding of what is going on, what are the plans for the next 5 years as far as IT goes, but how does that all fit into the programming aspects. And really where that landed us, a lot of the key considerations, the number one item really was that the high school, middle school modular replacement came the focus. So really that was the key design aspect. And so all these other aspects, number 2 through 8, really feed into that modular replacement largely. I mean, they all have aspects that I think are important to be taken into account as the campus grows and programming the building spaces evolve, but they really feed into this high school modular replacement. As far as larger classroom spaces, make sure the hallways are appropriately sized, having more mini collaboration zones. The collaboratory space in general, I think it's got its good use, but it's also when you walk around and you see the high top tables in the corridors, those types of spaces are really successful and they seem to be highly utilized. So those kind of mini collaboration zones are of interest. Flexible seating, multiple functioning classrooms, campus safety, and then additional program in different types of spaces as far as offering entrepreneurial aspects to the campus. The next few slides are sort of more just like benchmarking data as far as where this is discussing the overall enrollment at that time and looking at it breaking out by grade as well. And then just to help give a reference point as we start talking about the programming of the future spaces, we went through and allocated what are your spaces today. So we looked at both State Road and looked at the variety of space sizes that you have today. The existing, high school, middle school modulars are pretty well undersized compared to the rest of the spaces on campus. So they're right now under 600 for the one modular and around 700 for the other. So our goal is to increase those in general, but that's just a reference point. You can sort of see where some of these other classrooms are as far as the new 500 modular is around 750 square feet of the classroom, as well as the STEM modular has some similar in that range. But you have the for the fifth grade wing or more along the lines of 1,000 square feet. And then over at Kemblesville, the newer reference point of the new classrooms are just under 900 square feet. And again, they sort of vary depending on which wing you are in that classroom, from up to 1,000 square feet. So really, as the high school, middle school became the focus, we really put together the existing program. We took a look at all the spaces that are in the existing modulars, the space that they require as it is today. And our option one was just replacing that in kind, in that the quantity of the spaces, the space types. We did increase the square footage of the classrooms just because the classrooms as they are today are undersized. So this option one is that option where we are replacing it with it's 22 classrooms today, 22 classrooms in the future. So that and all the offices, learning, support center spaces are all quantity wise the same. There is some additional programs shown here that are really associated to the building core elements. The desire or thought was that going into this is that if we did a modular replacement, that would be a 2-story modular to reduce the footprint on the campus that we would be taking up. So we have stairs and elevator allocated in here as well. So that was the first step that we looked at. So we looked at option one. So that was really looking at a 2-story modular replacement in kind of the existing program. Option two was really then taking a step and thinking about how to grow the facility and what makes sense. So through discussions, it basically our target was an increase of 100 students in this facility specifically. So we took the average number of students that occupy those buildings at a time and added 100 students to that. So what we really can't really zoom in on this necessarily, but so that really resulted in we took the number of students utilizing, assuming 24 students per classroom came with the need of 27 classrooms. So we have 27 classroom types in this facility to accommodate that increase of 100 students. In addition, we evaluated other needs that are on the campus as far as the office lack of offices and need for some more. So we incorporated a hoteling office into this program as well as a medium-sized conference room to be in this facility. That way it just gives some flexibility for that office function in that space. This also adds some of the mini collaboration zones that we discussed earlier with hope that we could program them into nooks or develop spaces for them into the facility. Then we have the sort of the building needs as far as the restrooms, again, vestibule, lobby, stairs, elevator, all of those elements that are required. So everything sort of actually that's highlighted in the gold here is all program that was added or above and beyond what was originally that is on campus today. So one thing I think it's important to understand too is we looked at 24 students per classroom, and I think what that does give the school in the future is there is some buffer there as far as if the class size increased, you still have capacity to grow your population a little bit in the building as it's being programmed here. So assuming 24 students per classroom, 27 classrooms, if you assume 28 students per classroom, you only really need 23 classrooms. So we really, and we didn't go as far as going down to 20 students per classroom. So that would go ahead and take you up to 32 classrooms. So really took that 24 is the number we really looked at as our basis for the average number of students per classroom. And then the final option actually harkens back to when we did this process last time. We went through a master plan effort. And we really developed a concept for a building could be called the campus commons at a point in time. And that really had a little bit of a different focus than this facility, but it did incorporate a gymnasium space that had a gymnasium and stage as incorporated into it. And as we discussed going into this, if we're venturing down this path of a new facility, new building, that this is an opportunity to investigate whether that makes sense at this point in time as well. the school at this point doesn't have a location where you can have everyone together in one space. There just isn't a space that exists. So this would be an opportunity to provide that on this campus. So that's option 3. As far as the classroom aspects of the program, it's identical to option 2. It just adds that extra program of the gymnasium, stage, locker room, bleachers, and storage. The sort of this gold component is all in addition to option 2. So this is looking at all of them side by side as far as the sizes of the proposed buildings and the square footage of the program. I apologize, I failed to note another one, I think, big differential between option 1, which was sort of replacing we grew the classroom sizes, but we put them around 800 square feet per classroom. So it's a pretty significant increase from what is in the buildings today, but it's not hitting sort of some of the more optimal sizes, just really driven by space requirements and making sure we were keeping it on sort of a realistic scale. In options 2 and 3, we enlarged that to 900 square feet. So the classrooms in option 2 and 3, while there's more classrooms, they're also slightly larger classrooms. So they're on par around 900 square feet for those spaces. So we went through this process and reviewed this as we were going through with the steering committee. And then the next steps for us were really to validate that the program and the square footage is realistic. And then also how to site something like this on the campus. So we really moved into block planning and, So this slide really is talking about benchmarking as far as allocation of square footage per student on a facility scale. It really highlights that, like, where Avenue Charter School has tracked over the years and based on the growth of the population, student population, and then where these options sort of help to increase the square footage per student. So option 1 really sort of maintains where you are today with a slight increase. Option 2 is another slight increase, and then option 3 is a little bit of a larger jump, just because the program space that's added with incorporating the gym stage area into that space. Really,
Jared, I think it's important for them to highlight, just so you see that right now, currently, the ratio of space that we have per kid square feet is not what the norm is. We're under square footage already without building anything. So I think that's really important for you to see and hear.
Right, you can see historically. So this line is when Campbellsville was acquired. So there was this brief, so green is sort of national average, blue is Avenue Grove Charter School. So there's this sort of brief period of time where, because of increased square footage as compared to enrollment, there was a crossover. But in big picture terms, let's call a national average around 160, and let's call Avenue Grove Charter School over the last few years of around 110. So that's square footage per student. And there's all sorts of variables to that, which get into discussion of gymnasium, right? Having a space where all the students of a single grade could gather at the same time. So and I don't want, the takeaway shouldn't be that your instructional space isn't on par, but looking at it objectively, there is a differentiation between the square footage allocation per student at Avenue Grove Charter School versus national averages.
So this gave a quick summary of our overall programming analysis before we jumped into the block planning. And really, this is stating that we're really focusing at State Road, the high school, middle school modular, and that replacement. And really at Campbellsville, due to the third grade wing expansion being so recent, there are sort of those maintenance upgrades or evaluation that we identified, but there's not necessarily over large scale programming evaluation or reconfiguration that is required at this time. So taking a step back, and when we were taking these square footages to look at how we fit on a site, we really took a look again at the existing site and constraints that are on this campus. So the site itself is a bit of an odd shaped hourglass site. So that's the blue line on the outside is the property line. So there's a pinch point at the middle. There are a few things that cross over the site that become things that we have to deal with. One is the blue line across here is the water easement. So the water line that goes across the campus, and there's easement there, so we can't build on that. The existing building, there's a setback from the building that we need to have if we're putting a freestanding building. So that's shown in this the green highlight around the building. There's some steep slope areas that are off the end of the building that go from the basketball court down to the playground area. The purple line that is shown here is the sewer line that runs around the campus. So that's something that we have that is there that we have that's being accommodated. The existing stormwater basin off the end of the loop road parking, that's an existing feature. And then the circle really around is really talking about sort of the walking radius, like that's approximately a 3-minute walk from the end of the building, where that really lands you. So that sort of was our ideal staying within that radius was our overall goal, but also managing all the other items. The green line here shown is the building setback, so that's from the property line, how close we can get our buildings to that. So we put together a few different schemes per option, looking at different locations, and we really developed the ones that are outlined further along. So again, option 1 is the modular replacement. Option 2 is the brick and mortar building and the growth program, and option 3 is the brick and mortar building that was the same program plus the gym. So this is just looking at taking the footprint that we identified in the program and looked at potential scheme as far as locations. So option 1, scheme A, is really trying to utilize the existing impervious surface area on the campus. So replacing the modulars in their similar location. And what that does by going to a 2-story modular, this is a bigger footprint than one of those buildings today, but it, by going 2 stories, we're taking up less campus space. So we're able to reclaim sort of the front parking area. And that will help alleviate some of the parking issues that are currently here on one site. So that gives the opportunity to sort of build a little forecourt, have still sort of a similar connection relationship to the building as they are today, but it does put it there. Logistically, this is probably the most difficult option just because it is where your existing modulars are. The construction of a 2-story modular is a little bit longer than a summer project. So there would be a period of time where students could be displaced. So they would have to find some other location or some other method to house them.
That was the conversation that lease might be something we can explore if that's what we needed to do to displace that many kids for a period of time.
Talking about
The Fred's Avenue.
So on here, we've also identified sort of the pros and cons to all of these options. A lot of them we sort of talked about in some manner, but really the option 1 doesn't really give you much, doesn't give you for future growth. It's meeting what you have today as far as space. The other option for that would be to do a modular off the end of Loop Road. That would sort of work back there and be construction at the back of the site. But this location would require the stormwater basin to be rebuilt. It's adding impervious surface, so the stormwater basin, the stormwater management would have to be addressed as well in that scheme. And again, if you could reclaim sort of all of the area adjacent to the building, whether it be parking or some other function, but all of that could be reclaimed as the other program. So then, as I mentioned before, we started putting together block plans to help validate the overall footprint that we were looking at in the program square footages. So this is really what these block plans are telling us, that it's a 2-story building, and that this is about the footprint, and this is in reality would work as far as that. These aren't fully developed as far as actual plans or spaces. It's really just again to validate the overall program building size that we're looking at. And then looking at it sort of 3-dimensionally and to help give you an understanding, the intent would be the 1955 building is a existing 1-story building, so this would be a 2-story building adjacent to that. For all of these options, there's a different schedule duration to them. That's, I guess, the one benefit to the modular is that overall duration is going to be a little bit less. The design documentation period is a little less, and the construction time period is less. And speaking with some modular vendors that schools worked with before, they anticipated to be about 7 months of construction on site. So that's about the time that we're looking at for that scope.
And with any of these, also consider the design documentation is also land.
Option 2 was the sort of growing the program, but looking at an actual brick and mortar building as opposed to a modular construction. So in this scheme, we were actually looking at potential of having it being a building addition off the end of the 1955 building wing, and be a multiple story addition. So I'm actually might help to sort of see it in 3 dimensions first. So really be a combination of a 2-story building as it's related to the 1955 building, but due to the steep slopes in that area of the site, we can utilize that area and actually have a ground level that exits out to the lower level on the backside of that building. So as you relate to the playground area, for this example, it'd be a 3-story facility. So that's really, this portion of the building is 2s, and this portion of the building would be 3 stories. There are benefits there as far as like it's going to be more of a component of your existing facility as opposed to some standalone building. So you don't have to worry about the travel aspect is a little bit less of a concern. You do actually help to alleviate some of the site accessibility issues that exist today. This kind of addition would help to alleviate some of those. As far as constructability, this would be a similar impact to the school as Kemblesville was, where it's construction going on right adjacent to the school. And it's going to be a longer duration, so it's going to be during the school year. So there's going to be potential issues as far as noise and all of that go on. You're also just in close proximity and sort of in the middle of the building. So while I think it is feasible to put this in here, I think it has a nice connectivity to the campus. There are some construction logistics that would have to be developed and worked out. There are some of the sewer line that was running that we showed earlier that sort of runs under this building. So that would be something that would be in addition that had to be addressed. So there are some complexities to it, but it's still a valid option. Second option was looking at sort of similar to the modular where we place it off the end of the loop road. And again, I think some of this was generated when we were looking at the Campus Commons project. That's really where we landed. We were landing the building in a lot of the schemes. All of these schemes, I should note, the stormwater will have to be addressed in some manner because we're going to be increasing the impervious surface. So the hope and desire would be that we'd be able to utilize the stormwater management system for this building to help also address some of the existing issues that are on the campus. And then the third scheme that we looked at is really looking at sort of a different portion of the site, really more on the planned south side of that hourglass area, and really sort of start to create a little bit of a campus quad area, that lower level between the STEM building and the new addition and the overall existing campus. So sort of the space that's out there today, it's existing the playground, and that was some of the discussions from programming. It was the playground as it's designed now isn't necessarily appropriate to the age groups that are here. So this could be an opportunity to redevelop that as part of this project to make it a more appropriate space for the students here. So again, the block plan that we focused really on the addition to again validate the overall program that we had and the footprints that we're indicating. So that again is looking at all 3 floors and incorporating all the program aspects that we had identified. And then again, looking at it in 3 dimensions. So I'll say option 2 and option 3 have a similar overall time frame. It's the real big differential is between option 1 and option 2/3, primarily because option 1 is modular, option 2 and 3 would be new construction. So construction has a approximate duration of 20 months, and then fitting is consistent with between both of them of 3 months, and then a value year for design and documentation. So in total, that would really be targeting starting in the fall of 2021 in order to have a building ready for fall of 2024. And finally, it was option 3, which again was the sort of grown program plus the gymnasium aspects. So again, looking at it off the end of the Loop Road area, which this started to get very tight with the water easement and building setback. So that's going to be a challenge. I think it's feasible to make it work and tweak it, but it's going to be pretty tight as far as constraints in that site. Similar, again, looking at an option where it's potentially an addition. Same concept as far as meeting sort of having a taller gymnasium space off to the side, and then your 3-story building addition off the end of the building. And then the final scheme really being again, similar location as option 2, scheme C, more of the south side of the site, developing and creating that campus quad as part of that scope. And again, going through the block plan process to develop the actual overall footprint to validate the square footage and footprint that's shown. So the 3-dimensional view shows that it's sort of that location of down on the subplan south side of it, of the campus. Again, with the hope and sort of all of these schemes, option 2 and option 3 would be looking at stormwater management sort of in the corner of the site to help alleviate, take care of any building that's being built, but also alleviating site issues that are there. Schedule-wise, similar duration to option 2. So again, starting in fall of 2021.
And logistically, scheme for option 3, for this scheme in particular, is probably the easiest to keep the existing modulars in place throughout construction, right? You don't run into the issues of needing a temporary home that you do under option 1.
Yes, and that's the case really for option 2. Yeah, that's sort of area location back at site. You really logistically would be much easier to use.
So originally, when Michelle, are you the only board member that was here for Campus Commons?
Yeah.
Okay. So we were talking about building a Campus Commons because we don't have any space that we can put an entire class, especially as our high school gets larger. The only space we have is the auditorium, and the auditorium doesn't fit an entire high school in that space. And then we talked about the gym being a resource center like this. Obviously, the board at that time gave the approval to Matt and Jared to scope out what that looks like. And so the pictures were beautiful and everybody's like, ooh, yes, let's do that. And then what ended up happening was Campbellsville took the priority, we built the addition. And that's where the Campus Commons stopped and halted. And that's where that's what the board decided to spend the time on. When we talked about replacing the modular, what we talked about was modulars don't have great lifespans. And what we're seeing with the modulars that we currently have, they're beautiful, but they have water problems and floor damage and all the things that we have to continually monitor. And so with this kids that we'd have to add, there's also the conversation of if you add 100 kids, where are they all going to eat in the cafeteria? That cafeteria space isn't going to work. So the gym upstairs, like Campbellsville, would have to serve as a place that is connected to the cafeteria that we could possibly serve kids in, as well as that space that we would need then a gym to put classes for assemblies and serve the purpose of the cafeteria. So the big question was, obviously, a modular is what we thought financially was going to be the best option for us, which money is going to be the deciding factor in this, right? So there was the modular, but then we talked about was the building perspective. We could get the gym space that we need by adding the kids. We have the kids on the waiting list. So when we looked at, can you go back to the costs? Because you have to remember, we have to lease a building. We don't know what that's going to cost. We have to have the upkeep of every year, what it costs to have the modular on campus. So when you really outweigh the 3 options of the total cost, I can't read it, Jared. Can you?
Do you want me to talk
Yeah,
through
go
the
ahead.
budget really quick?
Yeah.
So essentially, this is a sort of abstraction approach to budget, right? Because we have conceptual blocks on the site plan, and yet with that information, there's a number of of project costs, construction costs, et cetera, that we can extrude. So what we did was we looked at the 3 options, and we also kind of added this additional option 2, which is kind of a hybrid between, it's not an addition, it's a new building, but it doesn't have a gym. And essentially we extrapolated square footages, looked at square footage costs, looked at site costs, looked at that based on recent project information. And then we came up with construction costs for modular versus new construction versus site work, added a contingency on that. We included line items for civil engineering, for project management, for architecture and engineering, for traffic design, for geotechnical, et cetera. Those are all varied depending on the project, because, for instance, with the modular replacement, theoretically, we're not really adding people, so there's less of a traffic impact. Versus for option 2 or 3, there's a bit more of a site work consequence, so there's more civil engineering. And we also included a placeholder, a sort of dollar square foot for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, again, based on historic project information. And then permits, fees, and testing. So things like NPDES, which is a state stormwater requirement. There's a different impact of that, where we're impacting more earth surface versus possibly less with the modular replacement. We included fees for township permits and township engineering review and all of that. And then we were also trying to sort of quantify some of to provide a more comprehensive view of the project costs. So with leasing, there's an assumption that there's a 5-year lease, but that will extend presumably over 20 years. So looking at the modular as just first costs doesn't really give you a full picture. So we were adding in, based on correspondence with some modular vendors that we've used before, potential lease costs, temporary facilities for that kind of construction duration. And then we added a project contingency. So with all of that, we put a 20% range. So we got a budget and we went down 10%, up 10% as a reasonable range at this phase of conceptual budgeting. The option 1 modular was between 24.4 million and 30 million as a lease modular scenario. And addition was between, we'll say, 20 and 25. Building new was similarly between almost 20 and 24. And then building new with a gym was 23 to 28.4. And if you scroll back, Jared, the other sort of below the line considerations that we didn't add into those costs, because they're sort of apples and oranges, I don't know how you'd add them in, is considering the potential revenue from additional students over that, again, like 20-year lifespan. And then also thinking that if you replace modular with modular, then presumably in 20 years, there's a replacement cost for that. So this is all sort of in the detail, but part of the conversation I would think that wants to occur.
Can you go back to the yeah? So when Donna and I and Brian saw that, of course, I had a shock factor. I don't know if Donna had a shock factor, but I definitely did, because I just assumed the modular was going to cost a lot less than building a building. And knowing that the modular comes with a lot of issues, that was very surprising to me. So when we looked at it, there was the conversation of, obviously, we would like the most space we can get. We would like the building with the gym. That would be our preference. But money is going to be the issue. And so, Donna would have to explore with me a bond. And we've had those conversations around a new bond. We can't refinance yet from our old bond. So there's those conversations that have to happen and we have to explore. That isn't going to happen overnight. So all of these options are on the table, but for Matt and Jared to scope out like the modular or the campus commons would be insane. Like the cost of money to do that is just so much. This is overarching, but to really zone in on what that looks like, I'm hoping that we can come to a consensus of this is the best option, that we should at least start doing the work, figuring out how much the bond's going to be, what we can do, what the timeline is, along with what does it look like. But again, understandable that these conversations have happened for over a year, but this is a lot of information at you at one time. So I'm not sure if you have that, oh my gosh, moment that Donna and I had in this presentation, or if you're really just paralyzed in the information. So just looking for a pulse check.
I have a question.
Sure.
When we went through this a few years ago with Campbellsville and talking about the campus commons, it's my recollection that we decided that Campbellsville building there was a much, much better deal because of the issues with the zoning and the permit here. Did you look at all or consider, I'm sure you did, but what was the thought about expanding more at Campbellsville and moving more grades down there?
So what we did at Campbellsville the last time, the township Franklin Township has a very odd portion of their zoning ordinance where commercial structures are limited to 40,000. I'm making this up a little bit, but there's a finite quantification of how many square feet a building can be, right? Irregardless of lot, irregardless of everything. So the last time through that township, there was a variance granted. Not a special exception and not a conditional use, but a variance to allow the school to expand to the extent that we did. And I think at the time, the hardship was essentially maintaining the viability of the property. I think from a zoning standpoint, we've taken up a lot of that impervious surface and building coverage, what we were allowed to do there. So further expanding there, I think would be probably a little more difficult from a zoning standpoint than it would be here at this campus.
And attract.
I think it's also just traffic, and it's also just the instructional model too of how you want to divvy up your grade level.
So it's not as good of a deal or as viable as it was back then because we already put a lot of space there.
Use some of the allotment that you have.
Got it.
Exactly. And I do want to clarify one thing about budgeting in terms of if you take out the lease, the modular is a cheaper first cost.
Right.
But, and that's why
More expensive.
educational facilities use them, right? Either because it's easier first cost or because it's seen as temporary space. Like truly, you're going to use it for a while and then you won't need it because to deal with a population bulge or that sort of thing. But I think it's important, if, Campbellsville was completed in 2018, in 20 years, it's still there, that expansion. You don't need to rebuild it, right? With a modular, just the manner of the construction, there's a replacement cost in the future, et cetera. So it's important to keep that life cycle cost into account.
How much time do we have left on the modulars under the current lease?
For the depreciation, 4 years.
4 years. So the proposal to go to 2024 is still within that 4-year period.
Yeah, it's 1 year short. 24.
So that gives us additional ability if we run into construction issues where we got to add time to it.
Yes.
Sorry.
No. Jared, so the prices there, some of them are in different locations, like we'll do the one with the GMC. It's either on the east or west side. So that swing accommodates wherever we put it.
Yeah, I think, these numbers don't it's more the concept. It's a brand new building out on the site than not. That's a little different from the addition. That's why we sort of clarified the addition option versus the build new.
Right,
So there's a slightly different differential there. But that really covers any of those areas that are out on the site as a standalone building.
And that, it's 20%, right? It's quite a lot of swing.
Right.
But there's a lot of unknowns right now in terms of how utilities get to the building, existing utility service, just the parking configuration, and any of these where you're adding students, right? You're adding traffic, so there's certain traffic impact studies and that sort of thing.
We know about traffic.
But there's also opportunities to remedy.
Yeah. No, that's good.
I think I look at something a little more softer than numbers, hard numbers. It's sort of the feel of what the school, for many people in the community, if you ask families, parents, lifelong community members. I grew up in this community. I went to both buildings. So I think there is a attraction for local families looking at that small appeal. So I think, to me, a lot of it is design based of how do you get that small feel with those small spaces. But I think that's a consideration that we definitely have to look at. That it isn't the super school, because I think that often is what attracts families to our community. It especially does over at Kemblesville, but I think also maintaining those same students. So I definitely see that as just a consideration of really looking at what does that look like? How do you have this small feel with larger buildings, larger footprints? But, that's just one of the considerations. I guess the other question just for us to consider is with funding and charter schools being at a critical point. We don't know where it's going. As far as we definitely know we have students waiting, lots of them who want to come here. And sort of that exchange for what you invest of what your return is. And and it's anybody's guess right now what those continued reimbursement rates are going to be. We don't know. I think, a lot is going to be shared in the next year of those. And I think it's nothing any of you haven't considered. But I think those are some things just for us to look at.
Years ago, it was, we didn't want to add students because we wanted that small school feel. And we continue to want that small school feel. But to do any projects for these kids, you need kids to spend the money to do the projects, right? So there is you build the mega school, right? Which is not what we're looking for. We're looking for space that works already for us. So right now, those modulars are not an option. They have to go. And so we need a solution. So it's part of not necessarily changing who we are to be bigger or to build. It's to get rid of something that's not working right now, that's not going to work in the future, and we need a plan. And we can't really wait to do the work to make the plan a reality, because as you already can see, it's going to take years for us to do the work. So we really need a direction of what work we're doing, which, we can say, okay, let's look at both the modular and the building. But if that's time and it's money, I mean, everything that we really weigh out is time and money. So when we saw those three options and Don, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it was like, okay, these are very similar prices in long term. We should go with what works for the community to get the kids what we were looking for years ago, along with what they need now to work for this program, and go down that road and at least see. I might come back and Donna might come back in a couple of months and say, no way, the bond's not going to work. We got to trash that plan, just like we trashed the campus commons, because it wasn't going to work. We weren't going to be able to afford both. So that is a good possibility that we come back and say it's not going to work, but we're never going to know if we don't commit to a path.
And I think what you're asking is, financially, I'm just going to speak, it doesn't make sense to go down the like for like for the modulars. That does not make any financial sense. So I think we're all on the new building.
I agree with Dwayne. And the modulars came to be because we were running out of space.
Yeah.
Dave Galligan, Joe, and Franny Lutz, we did them because we could get them in here. We could put them up in the summer and we were ready to roll in the fall.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, if my memory holds correct, our charter limits the number of total students that we can have, correct?
Yep, and we're up for charter renewal this year.
Okay, what is that number?
I don't have it off the top of my head, do you?
I was thinking this.
I think it states Avongrove students, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It's not Avongrove, not total enrollment.
It's not total enrollment, okay.
And it's not a cap.
Okay.
It's projected enrollment.
Projected
So we
enrollment.
have some degree of flexibility, although
Okay.
when we go for charter renewal, if we know we're going to be much above that,
Sure.
we will probably ask for.
So everything's kind of in line. If we need to ask for more. So,
That was my question, because the plan had to
Great
project
question.
an additional 100 students, and if we are close to the flexibility, then if that's not actually reality, then the additional revenue doesn't come in.
Yeah.
We fund
So does this,
So I guess
We also
something
have
sort of along those lines that I didn't
The
really
budget's
clarify or
1891
specifically
for next year.
When we
We're sitting
discussed
at
the program,
2050 right now, like you're almost at that.
Yeah.
when we discussed the program of the 100 students, it was discussed like where are we allocating? You know, like is the focus throughout the building? Is it through fourth, fifth, and all of it? But the focus really was middle school, high school, looking at those upper levels that do have a drop off today. They're, you know, that's the lower population look at the chart of the allocation.
but that lower drop off is changing because next year is gonna be.
That's what I was just saying. We're
Right,
sitting at
potentially a little bit
2040.
better. So
Yeah,
So
it's
as
a
far as
much bigger number.
the small scale feel, I think you should like to just to speak to that a little bit. I think you're sort of keeping that as far as your lower levels. It's not really changing that necessarily, but it's just giving you the option to stay and then like have to keep that scale of those sizes as they go up through middle school, high school.
And I absolutely agree. I have a senior who's going to be a senior. So he's been here since kindergarten. And I think that you have the smallest space for the biggest kids. And just trying to, I always think of Brian talking about the master schedule of really trying to what we offer those students, what we can provide. I think it's looking at those exchanges. And I definitely think there's a way to have a small feel with collaborative spaces. I think that really is the vision of moving forward with schools. And I think we have to keep going forward in that. And I think it would allow for that. And we definitely have the bubbles coming up. I mean, even this year's 12th grade coming in is not quite double this last year, but it's about 50 more kids. So you have almost double just in one grade. And I know those grades were your big grades when you built Kimballsville. Those were your bubble grades. So I definitely think there's an absolute way to do it. And to me, it doesn't make any sense just to keep renting.
So what number does that, if you were to tell, maybe you don't know, maybe you do. If you were to say this new school, let's go with the purple or whatever color that is. If that's all built and what is the number of students that we can then house? Is there a number to that?
That you create that number. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think we have that set number specifically.
If we maxed out 20 students per classroom.
Yeah, like to max it out.
I'm just wondering
We
what
talked
that,
about that 100 cap
Yeah.
is what we were talking about.
So,
but what does that bring?
In a class.
Additional.
Is that,
Money, you mean?
No. So I don't want to, so if you went down, well, I guess what I'm getting at is if you go down,
About 2,000.
what's that?
About 2,000.
But you mean just in this building?
It really depends on what type of class.
So that would cap you at 2,000.
Total enrollment, and that would bring us to
Starting
about
math class, 12.
which we're already at technically.
Class, I can fit.
I'm just trying to see,
Yeah.
is that going to give you enough? I'm sure.
Yeah, well, no, honestly, no.
Okay,
It's never going to.
just that's what I
Yeah,
figured.
no. We are asking for space for kids that we already have, really.
Right.
And we're saying, we're gonna put an extra 100 in there and make it
Just for
work,
good measure.
right? But at the end of the day, no.
Right.
This is not for any future planning. This is really for what we have now.
Right, so this is, yep. that makes
it's
sense.
more for transition of establishing bricks and mortar versus
Yeah.
cardboard and tin.
Right. Now there is a little bit of, so it sort of goes back to that. We took the number, I think it was 530, I would say that was like the average number of students in that building, and we added 100 to that. So we were targeting 630 is where we were at. But that also, again, was assuming 24 kids per classroom. So as far as growth goes, there is a buffer there if you want to increase your capacity of your classrooms to 28. It's 4 students per 27 classrooms. It's another 100 students potentially. That's really the maxing out number, I would say, of the building.
And just for scale, the new building is based on 900 square feet per classroom. It's not less than 700.
Right, no, I get it, yeah.
So I think we can, forgive me, Steve.
Daisy, I grabbed the charter renewal from the last time, and it provides an increase in the maximum enrollment target to 1850 students. Not specific to Evan Grove School District or anything, just a maximum enrollment target. So it's not a cap, it's an enrollment target. Coincidentally, is
So
Only a lawyer would say that.
moving along.
Right.
So are you, at this point, is the board in agreement that the modulars shouldn't even be looked at this point?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you can ask.
Donna, when we started this process, and I'm going to put you on the spot and I apologize, was there a number you were really hoping for to see that you thought like, yeah, we can do this? I'm comfortable? A little bit greater than 1 million, but less than 50 million.
To be honest with you, we have to look at where our programming is, because at the end of the day, we have to sell our school to the investors. So we got that whole first position, second position challenge that we'll have to face. But at the end of the day, we've always had a great story. So yeah, we'll be bumping our enrollment up 100, but that's not really the story. The story is that we have over 600 waiting lists. We're looking to bring in 100 more, but we're looking to grow the programming and build our community. And that's the story that we have to sell.
And I understand that. And I'm all for building the best that we can
I
afford.
was shocked. I
but-
thought that it was gonna come in, to be honest with you.
I thought it was gonna be
we
higher.
were looking around 18 to 20 million, because when we looked at Campus Commons years ago, it was like half of what I anticipated. I figured double, it would double. So was I surprised? I was, but is it a much bigger building? It absolutely is, and each room has more square footage. So again, this is a guesstimate. It's up to 20%. So we really aren't gonna have that information until we start down this path. And that's what we need to do.
And I think what we're doing is we're making a decision, what path do we want to go with?
That's it. We're just cutting off one slice of the apple there
And then
and
the
saying,
other-
Plan.
yeah, and just move forward to find out what we can do. It's not to make that decision.
Scheme C or build new option 2, scheme C, and build option 3 are relatively the same in terms of your classroom spacing. It's just the gym. So
But again, with the 100 kids, where they're gonna eat in the cafeteria matters.
Yep.
And I think that we're saying we really need that to make it work.
The common space has been an issue. I mean, from the get-go, Gene, and you were on the board, initially, we had planned 150 per class for the high school. I don't know how we ever thought we were gonna get that many kids in the modulars, but that was the plan. So, a common space has been an issue for about 10 years. We were gonna build an outdoor amphitheater, and Matt was on that board with that one. And then we decided to divert all funds to Campbellsville to do the expansion, which would open up more space here. And we could create the collaboratory for our students at State Road. But at the end of the day, we don't have common space. And if we do bring in just the building without that gymnasium, we're not gonna be able to provide the programs and services to those kids without the gym. And trust me, I'm not all about spending money. Really, I'm not. But if we look at what we're gonna spend and the story that we have to tell, we're more likely to secure interest in investors if we meet our program needs and we allow for growth. And by doing modulars, we won't. And the modulars are cheaper. They're not gonna look at it long-term, 20 years. What they're gonna look at is what our annual additional indebtedness is. So we would still need to increase we get bondholder consent to increase our additional indebtedness. And that's a whole nother can of worms, because we're not adding anything. We're just replacing in kind and not meeting program needs. So we may not get bondholder consent. So we're really looking at the 3 options. And we're really not gonna know what's gonna best suit our
Right.
needs. We think it's option is the purple option. We think the gym, this common space has been an issue for 10 years. And it's gonna continue to be an issue. But we really need to vet each option. What does it mean? What are the plans? What are the impacts? What are the timelines? Because until we get that information, I can't even go to an underwriter. I can say, here's our dream. And he's gonna say, show me the proof, show me the documents. And I don't have anything.
Not only that, but we'll have the additional 3 or 4 years worth of bond experience with the standard rating. And they're going to see the growth of the additional students for our projected cash flows.
Right.
And
And
it's,
the other thing that's here is that we are stocking, we just committed $4 million to our committed fund. So that plays into it as well. So there's money that is committed to the facility expansion or capital improvements that we're going to earmark for this building. That is key with our investors. It shows that we are investing in our future, and it's not them just giving us 30 million. We are trying to save money to set aside for this building. So this is a long-term project, and I know Matt talked about land development. That's 2 years. Now we need to get a NSBIT permit because we're going to be serving so much soil. That's Chester County. And now we have to deal with the Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, because it's all about sewer. and water.
2 years ago, I would have said to you, we do really well with Avon Grove buildings, and Fred S was the direction. And I was hoping that's what it was. COVID happens, time goes, and plans change, and here we are. So, I mean, I think with Donna and where we were back then and what we were estimating, I think we were, I mean, you were part of those conversations, Michelle. It was very Fred S directed, but a lot's changing. And a lot could change in the next couple of years. We have to move.
Not only that, but you're not having a fractured 3-site facility.
Right.
Compared to having 2-site facility.
Exactly.
So again, at this point, are you looking, I want to make sure we're clear. You're okay, I mean, if we say the modulars just don't even consider it, you're good. with
That's
moving
what I'm
forward.
looking for.
Perfect.
And then I would like to settle with, we are going on the path with trying to do the building with the gym.
Right, and that's
And
fine.
that's not saying we're doing this. It's saying we're gonna plan for that.
Could we get a copy of the presentation?
I was gonna ask that
Yeah.
question. So for tonight, I just want to make sure, and I don't want to, and we can vote on what everyone feels comfortable with. I think the first one, and not vote, well, just not vote, but consensus that the option one with the modules is not the way to go. And that would waste their time researching that.
It'll waste our money.
Yes. Because he had a big number. I don't know if you looked in that project management fee number. I noticed that number. Jared's looking at that new SUV. So are we all in agreement with at least that? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And does anyone, are we in agreement that I personally like option C and that, or purple, whatever we're calling it there? And that would be a path that they could start researching and looking at. And as things need to adjust and flow, we can always make those adjustments. We're not committing anything at this point, but just giving them that direction to move forward to. Does anyone have objections to that or questions?
I concur.
Does it make sense to look at 2 different options at this point, or is that significantly more? Like if you're looking at one to add one on at the same time?
I think they're looking at the 2, the middle and the end are about the same. It's just the gymnasium cost and the site cost. If we put the gymnasium on here or we put it over here.
Yeah, but aren't they gonna, it's still gonna, if we're saying if we're still leaving 2 options, those 2 options, I think I'm understanding this correctly. That's not saying where they are on the site. So that's a pretty big deal for us to say there's still 2 options on the table, because whether there's a gym or not really affects where the new building could go. Does that make sense?
I don't think we should focus on where it will go.
Right, but I think it will add planning cost if we're saying it could be this building with a gym or without a gym.
But I think what they need to do is they need at least a direction to point at.
Right now,
Because
Matt
there's-
has the one that's purple.
They have
Jared,
multiple.
do you wanna, or Matt, either, talk about what the difference, what that means?
But I just want to say there's a little difference, because yes, we're going to give them a direction. But this side has a direction to try and figure out, can we get the money? Can we do it? And they need to meet in the middle. So, just because we say, let's go with purple, at least give them a point to go to, doesn't mean that Don's going to come back and say, oh no, we got to do aquamarine. We can't do the purple.
And there's also, as we enter this, it's the next year is discovery.
Yeah.
So as we move through and we look at the CDP, and I mean, there's so much yet to be determined. So we may get into this in 2 months and say, oh, you know what we need to do? We may need to look at.
Yeah.
So, I mean.
So this is not we're going with purple. This is just,
We're vetting purple.
we're letting them go through and we're giving them, save us some money, because if we end up on purple, we haven't wasted time on baby blue and aquamarine.
A question of minutia here. These estimated costs, are they based on like today's environment? Like, we know that costs have gone up.
$15 for a 2x4.
They are
$65 for plywood.
This is like usually double.
That's a huge.
I'll say a couple things about that. The news media is aghast at construction costs rising. we're not building this out of wood studs, right? Steel joists, like you can't even buy these right now. So the fact that they cost more doesn't matter, right? There's things like PVC that have like tripled in price. PVC is so cheap in the great scheme of, so I don't mean to discount construction inflation right now. But we also, like, there's a reason that there's this 20% swing on these prices right now. And the other is we had a number of educational projects, including your summer project, that got bid and awarded in February, March, April. And those are publicly bid, publicly advertised projects, regional to suburban Philadelphia, now came in, in line with the budgets. So none of us can predict the future. And we have a project from Montgomery County that's being redesigned from joists to steel beams. We have a community center that's being redesigned. Well, we didn't go that much into the design, but we stopped designing out of steel and changed to wood, because of the construction manager's opinion on what would even out first. But construction always goes up, it always does. So escalation costs are certainly a consideration, and these are intended to be today's dollars. That wasn't putting too many caveats, but it's.
I still have a question. So when we did this before, we got detailed plans on at least two options before. We had Kemblesville and we had the campus commons. Is that correct? So I like the purple option. Like that's great. But I don't know if it makes sense to scope out more than one at this point, because last time we weren't sure where we were going. And I don't know if we knew we were going to decide on Kemblesville that early on last time. So I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
I think the last time it was building at Kemblesville and building at State Road was two different plans.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? It was drastically different. I think you're going to have options on the table just based on planning out Scheme C, because like what Donna said, with money, you might not get the gym, you might have this. So I think you're going to have options as we dive into the plan. I think you saw two options because they were two different,
right?
Not even just buildings. It was an actual different
And
ideas.
Michelle, just to bring us back to that time, we had originally started with a renovation here to this campus and campus commons. And then when we really started looking at the numbers and where we were treading between second and third grade. We felt that if we expanded at Kemblesville, because there had always been a Kemblesville kindergarten center that had always been out there. We looked at the drugstore across the street.
Stop playing now.
So it was at one of those meetings, we said, we already have enrollment. If we expanded at Kemblesville, we would keep the kids.
Plus the business office.
And then we would keep the business office. So that kind of came out of a conversation when we were focusing on the renovations here and the campus commons. So Kemblesville, it wasn't even part of the original discussions until we got into the campus commons and the renovations here over 3 years, that we said, okay, this is over 3 years. Are we sure we're going to keep the kids? And then we looked at Kemblesville and said, if we expanded at Kemblesville, which we thought was going to be really expensive, we already had the kids. If we expanded and brought third grade there, we'd be keeping them instead of losing them. And that would open up more space for programming here. So that,
and we did lose them. And then we started gaining them back again. And now that's why we have an uptick here.
So we set on the path of State Road, and the focus was State Road. And then as we started down the path, then all of a sudden Kemblesville became an option. So then we had two paths we had to look at. And Kemblesville served as the more profitable one for the school and the better story.
And I want to say what Jean said is absolutely right. By doing the purple, the other two are already in there. It's just a
Yes,
jam.
that was my question. So these are similar enough that if we explore one and we see that that's too expensive, we're not scrapping it.
You're exploring the ultimate option that will play into what we find in other areas.
Yeah, basically gym, no gym. So.
Yeah, and I guess from my standpoint, architectural, just to kind of talk back to you know, the Kemblesville expansion was moving third grade there. The Campus Commons was providing relief for grade-wise gatherings here. So they were solving totally different problems, right? I don't know that we have mutually exclusive problems here. The main problem is that you have modulars that need replaced, and you need to find a place for those children. So there are variables in that. Is 100 more students the right number? Should be 75, should be 125. You know, there's some, but I think those are kind of gradients to a design option.
But Matt, one of the things that we have the benefit of is that we've got these modulars for another 4 years.
Yeah. Right.
That allows us to do the construction without turning the school upside down or having to displace the students.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? I don't want to rush it, but I want to just make sure.
I wanted to do a clarification to distribute this.
Yes.
All of the numbers in the existing facility, that maintenance plan, some of them are blank, they're all in progress. So just so everyone understands.
Yep, understood.
Okay. So it sounds like we have a plan, a path.
Is everyone in agreement that they should look, the consensus
A vetting path.
purple?
Okay.
What, we need to come up with a different name than option 3, scheme C.
3C.
3C.
Okay.
You got it.
All right. Great. Thank you.
One thing I would be interested in looking at with that one, I really like the scheme C with that particular location opposite the playground on that quad space. Sounds like a really promising idea where you can actually create more of a collaboratory space out of what's already a field. So I think that might be a probably kind of cheap design consideration, like how you're going to like create a quad space out of that.
Sure. I think that's honestly after looking at these, like our sort of preference on site location is the location. And
We've been talking about that playground for years.
yeah, and I think, you know, like Donna or Kristen mentioned earlier, like the amphitheater, like, you know, that was an option back at one point in time of how to utilize that hill. You know, you have this steep hill site and how to utilize that. I don't know if that's the right solution here or not, but I do think that's part of this aspect of citing it here. How do you redevelop that to make that useful and part of the campus? And, you know, I think there's really, when you start going down the road, you know, phasing of projects and things like that, like, you know, is the building the main project and the quad is future project, things like that all will get discussed and vetted out at some point in time. But like, I think for now, it's really about, how programmatically, master planning wise, how can we make this work?
I would also say that if you think about like your school as your brand and what you're seeking to reinforce from the community, you know, developing a new building in the field where you have space to, where you can kind of maintain this more intimate scale, I think is more consistent with how you see yourselves and how you differentiate yourself from the districts that you develop from. You know, this has some complexity to it, like there's deliveries and where to get rid of trash, you know, so there's some logistical considerations, but I think it's all solvable.
Right. I don't want to, I want to make sure you have your questions, but we have a couple more things I want to get done before it gets too late.
Yep.
So we're all good? Any other questions? Okay.
I'd like to express our appreciation.
Yes, thank you, Matt and Jared. Thank you very much for being here.
Okay. All right. So the next two things are actually going to be very fast. So Brian gave you the emergency instructional time template. Brian, you want to add, because we need to make a motion to pass.
So we had talked about this when we redid the calendar about doing the instructional days. This is just the paperwork that you basically need to approve and sign to send to the Department of Ed.
So there's nothing new. It's just to sign and approve it.
Yeah. So do we have a motion to approve 2021, 2020, that needs to be fixed, 2022 emergency instructional time template? Thank you, Gene. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? You got it. Passed. Unanimous.
Then the health and safety plan, we already talked about this at the last board meeting. I added 2 components that the state asked us to add, which was things we've already talked about, the emotional support and safety support, along with what we're doing instructionally to meet the kids' needs that need it, like the interventionist. So there's 2 paragraphs that I added that address those questions, along with the mask the CDC updated their wording that we didn't update on this health and safety plan, which says if you're vaccinated, again, you wouldn't have to quarantine for a close contact. And that,
3-month question.
say it again.
Michelle had the question at the last meeting about the vaccination period after 3 months. Chester County changed that.
So we
So
put that in there too.
we updated that.
Yep. Anything else? I mean, that just really needs an approval. We have to post it
Yep.
and we'll put it on there, but we discussed it at length the last meeting. So it's really just for the revision of the academic portion and the social emotional that we've talked about at length.
All right, do we have a motion to approve the updated health and safety plan?
I'll make a motion, Stacy Barno, to
Thank you.
approve the update.
Thank you. Joe, second.
I'll second. Colleen Preston.
Thank you.
And I'll need you to sign that too after the.
Yeah. Any discussion, further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So moved. Thank you.
And then that's it.
All right, any final comments, Brian, or?
So I made a mistake last meeting, and it was, yeah. There was a comment submitted for last meeting that didn't get read. It was my mistake on highlighting a wrong row and I overlooked it. So I wanted to read it tonight to put it into record and to make sure that the individual heard that their comment was read and that, again, it was my mistake on missing it for reading. So the comment came from Robert Huff of Coatesville Area School District. And it simply read, please explain the school's policy on critical race theory. So that was the comment that was missed last 2 weeks ago.
Thank you for catching that.
Yep.
Any other reports from the committees? No other public comments?
I would just like to say thanks to our nomination committee and the board members that worked on it.
Yep.
And welcome our new members.
Welcome. And the final, since this is our last meeting of the year, I did want to take 2 minutes, I promise, and we'll be done. And I think we all, as a board, should say thank you and show our gratitude, not only to the administration and the teachers, but there was a driving force that worked extremely, extremely hard behind this last year. And I hope to God we never, ever have to do it again. But I do want to recognize specifically Kristen and your hard work. And I think we all she deserves a round of applause. All right. So having said that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'm looking to adjourn.
Okay, Deji. Deji, it's Michelle. Do I have a second?
Second.
Michelle McRae, all in favor? Aye. So moved. Thank you very much.